Welcome to Cowboy State Daily's Conversations with Legislative Leaders. I'm your host, Leo Wolfson, and today I am here with Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon. Governor, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's great to be here. Thanks, Leo.
Absolutely. We're in the thick of the 68th Wyoming legislature right now. A lot of action happening every day. You have been around Wyoming state government maybe longer than people realize, though. Before you're governor, which is I think how most people know you as, you were the state treasurer for a full 2 terms as well. How is it seeing the legislature now compared to when you were treasurer? How has the dynamic changed, and then what similarities are you still seeing?
Thanks for that, Leo. And actually, I've only been I was only treasurer for 6 years. I filled out the term of Treasurer Meyer. I think there is a bit of a change of attitude. I think that maybe one of the aspects that's different is how much we're affected by the national narrative now, and that's understandable. We've certainly been through a lot of trauma over the last few years with, a Biden administration, and before that, COVID, and a number of other aspects. So I do think that national narrative has really suffused much of our conversation here. And I would say that when I first came here as treasurer, there was a really long established kind of experience in the legislature. People that understood had been through both good times and bad. The time in 2000 when the state balanced its books off of the wealth of an individual who died. That was, I think, a remarkable time for the state. Now we have quite a bit of younger legislators, some, about a third it seems to me, this is their first term, another third that have been in just for two terms. And so there's not really that same sense of history, I think, in the legislature that there was. So.
Okay. Yeah, it does seem like there is kind of a new guard that has taken over. Obviously, you can't comment on specific legislation and things like that, but for people who don't know, the way a bill really passes into law is it goes to your desk, and then you get to weigh in on it or not say anything at all or veto it. And then the legislature has the opportunity to override your veto, but that doesn't happen very often. So you are kind of the last stop guard for a lot of these bills. What kind of things are you going to be looking for generally with legislation that comes to your desk during this session?
Well, we sort of put together a bit of a checklist in my cheat sheet here so I don't forget some. We want to start with, is it constitutional? Does it erode state or local control? Does it interfere with personal rights or private property rights? Does it grow state government or create significant ongoing costs for the state? What does it do to the citizens? Does it in some way impinge on the state's fiscal situation? So does it weaken the state fiscally and financially? Does it make Wyoming better for our children and grandchildren? And does it foster a good business climate? Those are sort of the things that I kind of walk through on each bill. The constitutional one is obviously the first stop. And that is one where I'm blessed to have the opportunity to work with the Attorney General's office. They can look through it and how that comports with the Constitution. And those have been some of the issues that I have raised the veto question on in the past. I generally don't like to veto things unless they're, don't meet these challenges. Try to work with the legislature. As you know, I think, Leo, I try to comment on every bill. I think there have been people who have said, I'm just going to let the bill go into law without addressing it. And I've usually saved that category for, this seems like it's something that the legislature has been working on. It seems like something the people of Wyoming care a lot about, but it has some flaws. And so here are the flaws, and I hope the legislature in the future will will rectify those. I think I've done one letter where I signed it and gave a reason why, and then otherwise the vetoes, obviously you have to return the veto message to the House of Origin with the reasons that you vetoed it.
I see. Interesting. Obviously, property taxes has been a huge topic generally in the last few years. What's kind of your outlook? What would you like to see the legislature do with that this year? Obviously, pretty significant property tax bills were already passed last year, and some of those are still just going into effect now. But a lot of people are still clamoring for more. What would you kind of like to see as far as what comes to your desk?
Appreciate that question, because as you mentioned, we did sign 4 bills last year, all of which had some significant impact. The concern was, of course, that property taxes have been rising in some counties much more than in others, but substantially so. And folks that through no fault of their own, maybe retired, lived in the house for a number of years, suddenly their house appreciated and they were no longer able to afford living there. So first off, we tried to make sure that we could give a rebate on that to kind of somehow tamp down the pain of that increase. We gave veterans twice what they've had in the past. We made sure that we capped the way taxes could raise on the assessed valuation over years to 4%. Some people were seeing 23, 24, 18, over time, pretty substantial numbers. And then we gave people who had lived here for a number of years and were over 65 also a tax break to sort of address that particular issue of the person who had lived here for some time. The one I vetoed last year, I vetoed for a very conservative reason. I believe strongly that tax relief should go to those who pay taxes. I don't think you cut taxes for one group of citizens and put that on another group of citizens. And last year, the amount of payment would go to the counties was going to come out of our mineral royalties and the work that the mineral companies were doing. That's a conversation that's going on now, too, and I think it's a challenge. Now, the election, unfortunately, in my mind, really focused on just property taxes without people fully understanding or appreciating where those property taxes go. So the state doesn't benefit from property tax. Only the counties do. So as we reduce what that tax is, or what that payment is, hopefully we get back to somewhere where we were a few years ago, and we don't necessarily go below that. But for some counties, in particular our small counties on the eastern side, that's going to be pretty devastating. But again, I think the conversation has to be one that folks understand that property taxes go to local government, not to the state, and that property tax relief will affect schools, will affect fire departments, will affect snowplow budgets and others. And I think that conversation has got to be joined at a larger level.
Yeah, it's a very complicated topic, and there's a lot of moving pieces, to say the least. But you're completely right. I mean, you look at a county like Niobrara County; they were barely able to add health insurance for their employees as a result of the very small increases they saw post-COVID, whereas Teton County is seeing increases of almost 50% in some instances. So it's a very challenging thing, and I think it is important for people to understand the complicated nature of it.
Yeah, and I think it's also clear that you're going to see most of the tax relief benefit accrue to counties like Teton, which have had those highest increases. And that's just the nature of the way this plays out. One of the things that I think is a backdrop for this, Leo, is the fact that we have, as a state, gone through so much change in the way we finance things from the state government. And that's one of the changes that, we talked about a little bit earlier. When I was treasurer, we had mineral royalties that came in from exploration. We had something like 33 rigs that were running in the state. We had coal mines that were still somewhere in the neighborhood of 27% of our electric gen, down from 50%, but certainly much higher than we are today. in 2016, we saw a crash in our oil prices that was pretty substantial. It was actually the largest drop in revenue in the state's history up until COVID, which happened just a few years after that. And we had to, people understood that we had built up the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account, and we could do some things to mitigate against that. Along came COVID. We did a phenomenal job of mitigating against that. We lost a third of our revenue. Wyoming crude was trading in some cases at a negative level, and coal production was down. All of that. That was then filled in with tremendous amounts of federal money, which we used to take care of specific things like infrastructure projects in small towns. We were able to swap out some of that federal funding, not illegally, but the way it was intended, and put some savings in that allowed us to cover those costs. So for this group of legislators, they haven't seen sort of the standard, here's what energy production does, here's how we use it, these are the reasons why we save. They've just been used to having different revenues coming in at prodigious rates. So it's nice to be back to normal, but it's going to take a few years to understand that.
Yeah, and God forbid we have another downturn, but I mean, a lot of these legislators might have to learn the hard way what that's like and to have that experience.
I think that's true, and as I look out over the horizon, I am very encouraged by this administration. Doug Burgum is a good friend. Kristi Noem is a good friend. Chris Wright is a good friend. These are all people that are going to play a large role in our energy production. And so today, I think we have something like 12 or 14 rigs, down from 33. But largely that was because the Biden administration put a kibosh on any kind of new leasing. So we'll see that kind of growth happen. But what's really critical, and I think people in Wyoming need to understand this, now is the time to make the policy decisions that will allow for growth to happen. I don't think it's a switch that suddenly everything's going to be fantastic. In fact, a lot of majors and some smaller companies and independents are pulling back their capital outlays just because the volatility of the energy market is a little bit more robust than it's been in a long time. China's demand is down. It's all a game of prices. It's economic at this level, but not at this level. So everybody's a little bit cautious about exactly how to invest in new production. So we're not going to see the benefit of this for a couple of years, I don't believe. But the policy implications and our opportunity to make the policies right for the long term, that's where we got to run hard and fast.
Okay. You're entering your last kind of stretch here as governor. You're looking at the last 2 years, so to speak. What are your big goals and big priorities entering kind of the last stretch?
Yeah, well, you never say never. Let me just put that out. I've never looked at this like you've got to get something achieved in a certain period of time. Ranching is always, this is a year, let's make hay when we can. Let's make sure we do the right things when we can. The things that I've really focused on, I want to see come to completion, not so much in terms of they're now done, but in terms of we now have a foundation on which we can build. So in education, it has been, how do we give our schools the opportunity to have a little more flexibility? We're obviously talking about things like school choice. Giving our schools the opportunity to be choice schools is something that that's the RIDE initiative, and it's just remarkable what we're seeing there. Just people's minds are expanding with, here are the great opportunities we can do to sort of improve education across the spectrum. In energy, just giving us a platform. We have, we're the second biggest energy producing state, and it's all of the above. But I'm now saying it's best of all of the above. You've known for some time that I've said that during the Biden administration, people were excited to build wind because there was a tax subsidy associated with that. And I kept saying, hold on, it is a huge landscape impact. And we need to balance this. And I think we now have an administration that understands that. I think we've got enough wind for a while. Being able to drive forward on nuclear, reinvigorating what has been a traditional industry for Wyoming and a very important part of our domestic security. That's going to be key. I think giving our oil and gas operators the opportunity to move forward and be able to do that on Wyoming's terms. That's the policy implication that I was talking about on a national scale, because we've done it all. I mean, we've allowed production, we've done a better job for sage grouse, we've done migration corridors. All the time Washington was fiddling around, and we've done it in a way that has actually promoted energy development and helped people go forward with jobs and understand the great hunting experiences they have. So I want to see our energy production improve and expand, and that means bringing new technology to the state. I think Wyoming is a leader. We've been in competition with North Dakota for some time on who's got the energy dominance there. Now it's being attacked a little bit by Louisiana and by Texas, and I think Wyoming needs to be right there. I think one of the things that I focused really intensely on was how do we diversify our economy? Our energy sector is by far and away the largest sector, but we've done a lot to bring tourism along. And now we have all these other little entrepreneurs that are coming. They understand that Wyoming's open for business, third lowest tax burden, great place to work with, government that's accessible. So from my standpoint, being able to kind of run with that is something that I hope this state will be able to do as we go forward. And lastly, because I think we need to, well, no, it's not lastly, there's two other things, but, because I think the state has workforce issues that we need to build on, two pieces of that. One is the bringing the university and our community colleges together to educate that workforce. Absolutely essential. WIP started that. WIP is now done. It was intended to be done, but that relationship needs to keep moving forward because that partnership between industry and the state is essential. And we need to work on housing, and that's something that we need to work a lot more on. And that's a little bit of a tax question among other things, but we'll hopefully get there in the last year or so of this term. Then I guess lastly, the issue that I have really focused on, it's still a black mark on Wyoming, is we have far too many suicides. And mental health is something that we need to continue to address as in health across all kinds of things. We could keep going on, but so I'm not going to lose much time, I hope, in these last couple of years making a difference.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today, Governor. Really appreciate it. This has been Cowboy State Daily's Conversations with Legislative Leaders. We'll be doing this every week throughout the session.